Hello to all the debt warriors listening, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. I'm your host, Katie Fata. Financial literacy is the ability to use knowledge and skills to manage your financial resources effectively for a lifetime of financial well-being. It's having the understanding of financial principles to manage your money in a wise and effective manner. Financial literacy covers financial concepts like making a budget, saving, paying bills on time, managing debt, planning for home buying, investing for retirement, and being financially aware of financial fraud. These concepts are very important, yet many individuals lack the basic knowledge about these important financial aspects. In order to be financially literate, you must know how to manage money and show you can actually do it. It may not be hard to learn the principles of money management, but to become truly financially literate, you need to take it one step further and implement good financial principles in your own life. This includes creating and sticking to a budget, saving for your future, and using credit cards without accumulating debt. Why is financial literacy so important? Today, I'll be answering that question, and I'll be joined by two women who work for the National Endowment for Financial Education, or NEFE. I'll be joined by Raven Newberry, Director, Policy and Advocacy, and Amy Martin Conrad, Managing Director of Insights. Both women have worked for NEFE for many years and value the importance of financial education. We had so much to discuss about financial literacy that this episode will be broken into a part 1 and a part 2. On part 1, Amy, Raven, and I discussed financial well-being, the impact COVID has had on personal finance, how Americans ended financially in 2021, and much more. Now let's get to my interview with Amy and Raven. Hi, Raven. Hi, Amy. Thank you for being on the podcast today.
Hi, Katie. Thank you for having us.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, guys. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the importance of financial literacy. So to get started, why don't you guys tell the listeners about your roles at NEFE and who you are?
Sure. So I'm Raven Newberry, and I am NEFE's Director of Policy and Advocacy. So I work in the organization's policy-facing arm. So we do a lot of things like monitoring legislation, providing technical assistance on legislation. Right now, primarily K-12 financial education requirements, and I help with our advocacy work, which is highlighting the need and benefit for financial education.
And I'm Amy Conrad. I'm the Managing Director of Insights at NEFE. So my role is in research to practice, in partnerships, thought leadership, and just trying to get, high quality research in the hands of people who are doing financial education.
So that's awesome. So could you guys tell us a little bit more about NEFE and what you all do there?
Yeah. So the National Endowment for Financial Education, we call ourselves NEFE. We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization located in Denver. We turned 30 this year, which is really exciting. And part of what we do, or our mission, is to advance and champion effective financial education. So we do that through investing in scholarly research that builds what we know about personal finance and how it impacts people's lives. We do that through policy and advocacy, like Raven mentioned. And then we do that with thought leadership and bringing people together in convenings and a whole lot of things. But really, high quality financial education is our focus. So we have had a long career, had spent a lot of time doing financial education curriculum in classrooms, and then in the last couple of years have really expanded our work in the research world.
Yeah, and I will make sure to link a direct link to NEFE's website in the description of this podcast so everybody can get it there if they'd like any more information on NEFE and what they do. So I guess to get started, let's talk about what financial well-being is. So what factors contribute to financial well-being?
This is a great question. So for NEFE to make sense of all of these really complicated things that add up to your individual well-being, we have this framework or model that we've created. So your financial well-being is something that you define for yourself. It's not a thing you have or that you don't have. Everyone has financial well-being. It may be at a high level or a low level, but you have it no matter what. and it's something that you get to define for yourself. And so within our personal finance ecosystem framework, we've looked at all of these really complicated things that weave together to support that financial well-being. So we've grouped that into a couple different areas. One is your foundational factors. So that's things like your values, your culture, where you live, what your family composition looks like. It also includes financial knowledge and access. So what do you know about personal finance? Do you have access to good financial products? And then that third area are financial decisions and actions. So what choices do you make? What results from those choices? And then how do you feel about that? And that's a cycle that repeats itself all the time. We're all making financial decisions every single day, from like really little things like, do I buy this candy bar at the gas station? Or big things like, where do I want to go to college? Do I want to go to college? Do I want to start a family? Do I want to move? So all of those decisions are feeding each other all the time.
Yeah.
So, it's this thing we try to make sense of that can be pretty complicated, but hopefully, we're able to make a little bit more sense of it by breaking things down into those smaller pieces.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good explanation, to help people learn a little bit more about your personal finance ecosystem and, kind of learn about financial well-being. So, so what would you say financial education is a factor in financial well-being?
Yeah, for sure. So education really supports financial knowledge, and that's where it's mostly linked. That's where it's most directly linked. So financial education is this really key part of increasing your financial knowledge, and it's helpful for building both like a foundational knowledge base for yourself and then helping you in the moment with decisions. So it has a role to play in both those areas. NEFE really makes it a point to say that financial education or knowledge isn't the only thing that drives financial wellness. You don't sit down and read a book or watch a show and then immediately go out and like make perfect financial decisions for the rest of your life. You need knowledge, but it has to come with the skill to apply that knowledge and access, the ability to put that knowledge into action. So for example, you can understand, how compound interest works and how to take out a loan, and you can know the interest rate if you're buying a car, but you individually don't set what those loan rates are. You may not have a strong credit history because you're living on your own for the first time. So that's going to dictate what products you have access to. So all that to say, there's a lot of systemic factors that are outside of our individual control, but building your individual financial knowledge is one thing you do have control over. So, we say that financial education is a piece of the puzzle, and it's something that the individual can build for themselves, even as these external factors may be challenging to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you brought up about where people grow up it plays a part in their financial education and well-being and such, because it's all about what resources they have around them. Yeah. So what is the current national curriculum for financial education?
Yeah, so there actually is not a national curriculum at this time. So to your point, where you grew up is very impactful on your access to financial education. So there are national standards, which standards they define what is to be learned at the end of the school year or at certain grades, while curriculum is, like more of a detailed plan for day-to-day teaching. So no national curriculum, but we do have national standards in place. And right now, financial education delivery really relies on state leadership to take the reins if and how they want to deploy it. And if not the state, it gets even more granular. So we see districts and schools, individual schools making that decision to offer financial education, and then how they want to do that, like duration and content covered. So all that to say, yeah, it really varies by locality and how leadership handles financial education at that place.
Yeah. So it's state to state, as you said. So do you know how many states require the financial education right now?
Yeah, so right now, 23 states require students to take a course in personal finance to graduate. And then actually just this legislative session, two more states added a requirement through legislation, Florida and Georgia. Florida is officially the biggest state to offer financial education. And it looks like Michigan might be joining their ranks, but not sure yet. So yeah, there's been some national momentum of states wanting to add this requirement. I think some of it is in reaction to COVID-19, and some of it is recognizing that students may not be getting this if their parents don't have that financial knowledge and wanting to cover the gaps there.
I have another question. Do you know how recently financial education has been implemented in schools? Because I'm only about like 10 years out of high school and it was not even on a blip on the radar then. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So I think it's been threaded, probably for, I would say, last 50 to 70 years, sometimes through home economics. So it's been like piecemeal, but as far as like a full-fledged state requirement, I think the first one was in the late 90s, and I can't remember which state it was, but we've seen it sort of surface in other subjects. Usually, again, when home economics is more of a thing, that was a place where students would get those money management lessons, but it's really sort of or in economics, but it's really sort of shaping up to be its own thing of like wanting students to have those skills and that knowledge to navigate increasingly complex financial landscapes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you could take it as like an elective, but it wasn't this mandatory thing, which I think it should be mandatory.
And a lot, you speak about 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, a lot of growth in our field happened during the recovery from the 2008 recession. So a lot more curriculum came on the market following that time. It became offered at colleges a lot more frequently. So I think, as a country, we were seeing a lot of households and families struggle in the aftermath of the Great Recession. And so now we have another, huge financial disruption to the entire economy. And I think that's why we're seeing a renewed interest as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And since you kind of brought up the last 2 years with COVID and everything, so has, this financial education helped during this tough financial time we've been going through?
Yeah, right. We know that, financial education can increase confidence, which we know helps individuals weather shocks. So we've done some polling throughout the pandemic to get a pulse on how are Americans feeling about their finances? What are they facing? And we know that 8 and 10 have said that they were stressed by something financial. 7 out of 10 were making adjustments as needed. So putting off financial decisions, cutting back expenses, delaying retirement, whatever that was. And we know that financial education can help you navigate those complex financial scenarios and decisions where people are having to look at their situation and make trade-offs. We know that financial education can help that piece of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these past few years have definitely been tough on a lot of people financially, and a lot of people didn't plan for this. So
right. Hard to plan for something as big as, COVID-19.
Yeah. I think if it's taught anyone anything, it's to kind of expect the unexpected financially and always have that emergency savings and such.
Yes. Very good mantra. Yes.
Yeah. So how did Americans end financially this past year in 2021?
Yeah. So this past year offered unique financial well-being challenges to Americans, maybe even more so than 2020. So again, NEFE does polling regularly, and we ended the year asking households how they were faring. So a big theme of this past year was unexpected expenses. So 65% of U.S. adults reported experiencing some sort of unexpected major expense in 2021. And we know these financial experiences really varied by demographics. So women were more likely to report experiencing this, and Hispanic adults were also more likely to report. So I think this affected all of us financially, but it did vary among different populations. And we also know that nearly half of U.S. adults reported living paycheck to paycheck in 2021. So yeah, there's a lot of precarity, I think, being felt and stress coming out of this past year.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a lot of unexpected expenses for sure, especially with kids having to be home and such.
Right. Yes. And like ripple effects through like employment and healthcare, all sorts of things.
Definitely. So after kind of going back to financial education, what is the general consensus with Americans? Do they want financial education in K-12 schools or do they not?
Yeah, there's a lot of very strong support for financial education, especially in K-12 schools.
Mm-hmm.
As Raven said, we do a lot of polling as an organization, and a poll we released back in April for Financial Capability Month showed that, about 90% of adults want financial education in K-12 schools, either as a standalone semester or as a year-long course. A lot of states provide financial education as part of another subject, and sometimes it's just a tiny part of that subject. So I think it's really telling that Americans do support financial education and support it being this standalone offering. And then when you ask people to reflect on, is this something that you wish you had when you were growing up? Most people say yes. 80% of people we polled said yes. So I think there's strong support for it. And I think some of the stuff we've previously talked about just the changes with the economy and with COVID, like it's a trend we've been seeing for the last couple of years.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, I would have loved to have it in school when I was growing up. And I think, if we start teaching kids now about financial education when they're old enough to have kids of their own, they can even pass it down to their kids if their kids go to a school that doesn't provide financial education or anything like that. Yeah, so I think it's just overall makes financial education will be something great for everybody.
Yeah, hopefully creating a foundation. And to your point, we know parents are a huge source of financial information and values and attitudes for their children. So if that might not exist in a lot of households. So something like a requirement can be that intervention that then creates a foundation that could have a generational impact and effect.
Yeah, I think that is a really good point, because if someone's in a house where they don't have a budget, their parents just spends without budgeting, or they don't have an emergency fund, they can learn about that stuff at least in school.
Exactly. Yes, it's a great way to cover gaps if parents don't have that knowledge themselves, and a lot of us don't.
100%.
If we weren't exposed to it anywhere.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. 100%. So I think this is going to wrap up part 1 of the importance of financial literacy conversation. Do you guys have anything else you'd like to add to part 1?
Yeah, I'll just say I think we touched on a lot of like the complicated things that make personal finance challenging. But I commend, podcasts like this and other resources where people are investing in their own education. There are a lot of things outside of our control when it comes to your finances, but building your own knowledge base is something that I think has huge advantages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a good point to bring up. Yeah. And I think, people who are listening to this podcast or who are seeking out information on their own they're helping their own financial education and such. So that's always great when people want to further their own financial education at any point in life. It's never too late to learn, especially financial education. So yeah, thank you guys for being here for part 1 of the podcast. I'm looking forward to talking to you about part 2, where we're going to talk more about the importance of financial literacy. For all the listeners, you have to wait to next month to hear our conversation on that. But thank you guys. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Raven, for being here and chatting with me today.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, guys. Learning more about NEFE and what Amy and Raven do there was a great precursor to this interview. NEFE has created a super helpful personal finance ecosystem that maps out what factors contribute to financial well-being. I'll make sure to put a direct link to their ecosystem in the description of this podcast. As Raven said, there isn't necessarily a national curriculum for financial education, but there is a national standard. It's on a state-to-state basis whether or not this financial standard is implemented into schools. As of now, about half the country requires personal finance education in schools. So it depends on where you live, whether you or your child have access to this financial standard. Americans were impacted by unexpected expenses at the end of 2021 due to COVID-19. Many Americans are still living paycheck to paycheck during this tough financial time. This time has showed us that financial education is more important now than ever. Being financially educated means you're more likely to have a savings and an emergency fund, which could have significantly helped during the past 2+ years. Statistics show that Americans want financial education in schools. In fact, 90% of Americans would like financial education to be a year-long course in schools. Providing financial literacy to children could help their financial future tremendously. Amy, Raven, and I only scratched the surface on financial literacy. I'm looking forward to having Amy and Raven back on the podcast for next month's episode to dive into the importance of financial education even more. Make sure you tune into next month's podcast for the conclusion of this conversation. With that being said, that wraps up another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rate and review us there. I'll talk to you next time, Millennials, Gen Zers, and everyone else listening. Bye.